Hope you've all had a nice lunch. I'm going to begin today with Revelation 6 verse 8. There's a lot going on in this world that we know nothing about. And I'm going to discuss with you chiefly today information contained in a book which takes its title after this particular horse in Revelation. And reading from verse 8 of Revelation chapter 6, "And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed, which is of course the grave, with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth." Now quite often we relegate that to the Dark Ages and the persecutions that took place there. But the matter is not finished yet. And we are about to see in the earth scenes that have never been on the earth before, and tragedies such as have never occurred before in the earth either. Millions will perish. Literally millions. Now, this book is called Behold a Pale Horse. The man who wrote this is Milton William Cooper. He was a sailor in the U.S. Navy. He also went through certain experiences, got certain medals. He was just a regular sailor. He joined the Naval Intelligence and had an inside view of what was happening from an intelligence point of view. This book is well documented. Now, the man may be a Christian, I get the idea that he is, but he doesn't know half of what a Seventh-day Adventist would know. But then he's not discussing this from a Christian point of view so much. Here and there something will shine through, and some things may quite take you by surprise. But it fits in with Revelation 13. Now, the pale horse symbolizes death, as this verse 8 tells us. "I looked, and behold a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death." And of course the grave goes with it. Now turn to Revelation 13 then. And we'll find out where this originates, at least as far as modern times go. Revelation 13 verse 11. "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb." What are those two horns? Yes, separation of church and state is one, religious and civil liberty, and so on. All right. He had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth, verse 12, all the power of the first beast before him. Who's the first beast? The papacy. Right. "And causeth the earth and them that which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." Then you'll find in verse 13, "He doeth great wonders." And here we come also into modern inventions, among other things. And by the way, if you were to take the inventions that we know today and liken them to a battery of floodlights like you find on the Sydney cricket ground at night, and you take away the electronic systems we have on Earth, and out goes one of those rows of lights. Then you take away the space program that we have, another row of lights goes out. Take away computers and other electronics, another row of lights goes out. Modern aircraft, take those away, the lights go out and lights go out. The further you go back in time, more lights go out, until you come to last century. And before the Industrial Revolution, all your lights are out. So all our modern inventions have come about like a veritable cloudburst in this last 100 years or more. And here we find references to this. "So he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Now he's talking about this beast with the lamb-like horns. And deceiveth them, notice the theme, deceiveth them which dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast. And as we said this morning, the knowledge of the fallen angels is so infinitely superior to the knowledge of men that what they do, probably were we to live as long as they live, we would discover these things in the normal processes of science. But what they are able to do seems to us to be like miracles. But there are certain things they can't do. However, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image to the beast which had the wound by the sword and did live. Now this fire from heaven, by the way, among other things, think also of a false Holy Spirit and a false revival in the earth. That's also symbolized here. All right. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Now let's stop there for a minute and go back to the book. This man, Cooper, who's the author of the book, what he's written here and what he's researched has caused these enemies to try to kill him on 2 occasions. On the second occasion, he lost a leg. So he's a man with 1 leg. However, he's been in the Navy for quite a number of years. And on one occasion, while he was on a submarine on watch, something astonishing happened. So I'm reading from verse 19. I'll give you the page references because Doug has a copy of this book. You'll find this book quite hard to get hold of, but I was told today that you can probably get it in your New Age bookshop down in Sydney. But it's certainly not New Age. It'll cost you a fair bit of money too. This man was on watch. And this is what he says. I'm going to quote from page 18 and 19 of this book. Speaking of those who were on the bridge or the conning tower of the submarine, he said, Lincoln, one of the crew members, went below. Geronimo and I began the unending task of sweeping the horizon from bow to stern. That's how you've got to keep your binoculars handy in wartime or in peace, and you spot anything that moves, record it. Then the sky from horizon to zenith and back again, and again he did this. I asked Ensign Ball to call for some hot coffee, and as he bent over the 1MC, which is the intercom system, I turned, raising my binoculars to my eyes just in time to see a huge disk rise from beneath the ocean, water streaming from the air around it, tumble lazily on its axis and disappear into the clouds. My heart beat wildly. I tried to talk but couldn't. Then I changed my mind and decided I didn't want to say that anyway. I'd seen a flying saucer the size of an aircraft carrier. Now if you take an aircraft carrier down the main street of Morissette, it'll cover the whole street. They're huge. Now this is a flying saucer this man has seen. Now there's been a lot of confusion about flying saucers, among other things. This is only part of what we have to say to you today. I'm not dealing with flying saucers so much, but I take your mind back to an experiment that took place in the Philadelphia dockyard in the United States in 1941. The book is called The Philadelphia Experiment, and very basically and broadly speaking, it is the report of an experiment carried out by Albert Einstein in 1941 in this dockyard in Philadelphia. The experiment was based upon his theory of 1929, which is a unified field concept. And very simply put, it is this. If you can couple the gravitational field of the earth with electromagnetism, you can create invisibility and move objects at high speed. Now, apparently they achieved this at that experiment. They used the United States destroyer, which had not been taken into commission, and the U.S. was in a war, or just started in the war about this time. So before the ship was placed in commission, they used this in the experiment by loading the ship with electromagnetic generators. Now this is not in this book. These are other books that I've read on the matter. And as the experiment began, a blue-green haze developed and went around the ship. I think it was in an anti-clockwise direction. Now it's the same blue haze that mariners, pilots and craft have reported from the Bermuda Triangle, about which you will probably have heard. Now the ship disappeared, as this went on, and all you could see was a depression in the water where the ship sat. Now, the experiment was carried out at sea while it was progressing through the water. The idea was to develop a good camouflage system so that the Japanese could not spot their ships. So it was carried out on 1 or 2 occasions, and on one occasion they moved the entire ship in a matter of minutes from the Philadelphia dockyard to the Williamstown dockyard, which was several hundred miles away. Now, that's a reported experiment. It's oversimplified. You cannot find the logbooks of either of those ships, and they're supposed to be kept for many years in the Admiralty. Albert Einstein's name is linked with it, and nobody's ever denied it, and nobody can deny it. The operation was called Operation Rainbow. Now, the reason why the story seems to be lost there is this affected the members of the crew adversely. Some of them ended up in insane asylums. Others, when walking down the street, one would freeze in time, which is a rather unusual thing, and only someone who had been with him on the ship could touch him and release him. This was a report that I read on this. Others would go in a bar, as sailors were wont to do, and drink, and the barmaid would come to serve 4 or 6 around the table, when one of them would disappear, become invisible. And she would get the fright of her life and throw her hands up in the air, and up would go everything. And they would end up in the barroom brawl, and these are just parts of the reports that came out at the time. A subsequent edition carried us a stage further into UFOs. And you can see, if this is true, that this development of UFOs is continued. But there's more to it, as Cooper picks up. He doesn't take it or link it with this experiment of Einstein. He does mention Einstein, if I recall. But here we have something very interesting, and knowing the background to fallen angels, we can understand how some of these things can work, because there's something much more nasty coming into this as we go along. Now, I did say this morning that there are weapons that we know nothing about that have been developed, and one of them is the microwave system. Now, we use microwaves in cooking, but today they've developed weapons in which you use them for killing human beings. And you may come across a body lying there, ostensibly dead for, unknown causes, from unknown causes, and when you examine it medically, the inside is cooked, as is the case with a microwave. So they're using that kind of weapon today as well. However, this man saw this huge thing come out of the water, so we'll go back there. Now, he wanted to report it. He didn't dare to, because people wouldn't believe him. You find it a hard job believing us from what I say, probably. See? So, he said in the 3rd paragraph down on page 19, it was as if nothing had happened. I saw only clouds and water. I almost thought I dreamed it. Ensign Ball straightened, turned toward Geronimo, and said the coffee was on its way up. I looked back toward the spot, about 15 degrees relative off the port bow and about 2.5 nautical miles distant. Nothing, not even a hint of what happened. So he said, Ensign Ball, I thought I saw something about 15 degrees relative off the port bow, but I lost it. Can you help me look over that area? Ensign Ball turned, raising his glasses to the eye level. He said, I didn't know it at the time, but Geronimo also brought his glasses to bear on that side. Geronimo was supposed to be responsible for the other side of the ship, you see. But he brought his glasses to bear on this bearing. And he said, I was just lifting the binoculars off my chest when I saw it. So he hadn't got his glasses to his eyes yet. But he says the giant saucer shape plunged out of the clouds this time, tumbled, and pushing the water before it, opened up a hole in the ocean and disappeared from view. It was incredible. This time I had seen it with my naked eyes, and its size in comparison with the total view was nothing short of astounding. Ensign Ball stood in shock, his binoculars in his hand, his mouth open. Geronimo yelled, and I won't repeat the words. He said, did you guys see that? So the next thing is they call the captain to the bridge. The captain comes up the ladder, he gives out instructions. He called the sonar to take the bearing, but sonar already detected something metallic there anyway. All right. He says the captain called down and ordered someone to closely monitor the radar. His command was instantly acknowledged. As the 5 of us stood gazing out over the sea, the same ship, or one exactly like it, rose slowly turned in the air, tilted at an angle, and then vanished. I saw the chief petty officer, snapping pictures, he says, out of the corner of my eye. This time, the man says, I had 3 images from which to draw conclusions. So he saw it 3 times within a matter of minutes, really. It was a metal machine. Of that there was no doubt whatsoever. It was intelligently controlled. Of that I was equally sure. It was a dull color, kind of pewter. There were no lights. There was no glow. I thought I'd seen a row of what looked like portholes, but could not be certain. Radar reported contact at the same bearing and gave us a range of 3 nautical miles. All right, so they all saw this, and the episode lasted about 10 minutes. Now, this is what happened. Before leaving the bridge, the captain took the camera from the chief and instructed each of us not to talk to anyone about what we'd seen. He told us the incident was classified. We were not to discuss it, not even amongst ourselves. We acknowledged his order. Now, further down, when they got back to base, they brought an intelligence officer on board. And the author of this book was interrogated. And he said this: when I entered the stateroom, the commander was holding my service records in his hand. He wanted to know why I had gone from the Air Force, etc. See? Then the intelligence officer said to him, what did you see out there? And Cooper said, I believe it was a flying saucer, sir. He said, the man began to visibly shake and he screamed obscenities at me. He threatened to put me in the brig or the prison for the rest of my life. I thought he wasn't going to stop yelling, but as suddenly as he began, he stopped. I was confused, see? So the next paragraph down, he says, well, let's start all over again. That's this intelligence officer. What did you see out there? Well, he got the message by this time. So Cooper said, nothing, sir. I didn't see a, well, I won't use the word. I didn't see a thing. I'd like to get out of here just as soon as possible. And a smile spread over the face, his face, and the captain looked relieved. Are you sure, Cooper? Yes, sir, I'm sure. You're a good sailor, Cooper. The Navy needs men like you. You go far in the Navy. It was whitewashed, you see. Now, this is in the 50s. The Philadelphia experiment was in the 40s. The best way to conceal anything is to create confusion. And you remember at the same time there were experiments, there were foolish things. People made their own little flying saucers, sent them up before they landed. They photographed them in the air and said it's a flying saucer. Well, that was exactly the kind of program that was undertaken to conceal this sort of thing. Now, I want to go over to page 196 to 199 to continue this, because this is based on reports. 196 to 199 in this book. This comes under the chapter called The Secret Government. Now, from page 96, this is a report. Between January 1947 and December 1952, 5 years, at least 16 crashed, that is a spacecraft, 16 crashed or downed alien aircraft, 65 alien bodies, and 1 live alien were recovered. An additional alien craft that exploded, nothing was recovered from that incident. Of these 13 of these crashes, 13 occurred within the borders of the United States, not including a craft which disintegrated in the air. Of these 13, 1 was in Arizona, 11 were in New Mexico, and 1 was in Nevada. 3 occurred in foreign countries. Of those, 1 was in Norway, the last 2 were in Mexico. And actually, there was 1 in South Africa. An alien craft was found on February 13, 1948 on a mesa near Aztec, New Mexico. Another craft was located on March 25, 48 in White Sands Proving Ground. It was 100 feet in diameter. A total of 17 alien bodies were recovered from these 2 craft. Of even greater significance was the discovery of a large number of human body parts stored within both these vehicles. Now, what do you make of that? Well, here we have, look, don't forget, as we said this morning, the devil is going to impersonate Christ. And we live in a space-minded age, and there are several things involved in this. The devil wants to get us all to believe in aliens in outer space, number one. And there's deception in this, obviously, but the point is, they need to make some kind of humanoid body. Hence the body parts. Now, there's some more in this report which will talk about the genetic systems and so on. Now, I'm linking this with the former because it all flows together. Now, I want to go over to page 201, 204 for those of you who have a copy of this. By the way, Secretary of Defense James Forrestal, you'll remember him, he wanted the United States government to release this information to the public. But the aliens, see, in quotes, the aliens said to the United States government, because Eisenhower met with them and signed a treaty with them, according to this report. Well, here we're dealing with fallen angels. That's what I want to get into your mind. Now, these aliens said not to release any information to the public, see? But James Forrestal, who was Secretary of Defense, I can't give you the year, 50, 60, somewhere like that, and he insisted, and he was going to do this, so somebody had him committed to an institution, a mental institution. So they kept him there under wraps and put out all kinds of stories about him. Now, he was a high-ranking man in the United States government. And you've heard his name, many of you. Now, his brother decided after some considerable time that he would get his brother James out. And when the U.S. government heard about this, the intelligence service there went into Forrestal's room, got a sheet, tied it round his neck, tied the other end of the bed, and threw him out the window. The sheet broke, tore loose from the bed, and of course he got killed as well as partly strangled. So that was the end of Forrestal. These diaries were confiscated. You'll find this on page 199. His diaries were confiscated, then later on certain elements from them were expunged, and finally some fellow who made a film about them were given the diaries so that he could use some of the detail for films, and the detail didn't amount to a row of beans. All right, now this is the time of Dwight D. Eisenhower, and this man's documented his whole book this way. During his first year in office, 1953, at least 10 more crashed discs were recovered, along with 26 dead and 4 live aliens. Of the 10, 4 were found in Arizona, 2 in Texas, 1 in New Mexico, Montana, South Africa, and so on. In 1953, astronomers discovered large objects in space which were tracked moving toward the Earth. It was first believed that they were asteroids. Later evidence proved that the objects could only be spaceships. So you see, they had this constant problem. Some of us, many years ago, hearing about these UFOs, had concluded that this was due also to spirits, or the fallen angels. Now, they would not obviously reproduce human bodies in their laboratories, or at least a spirit doesn't really need a living body, but they make a body for themselves, apparently, to appear to be aliens different from the human race. This is the only evidence. If they made themselves like us humans, we'd say, well, where did you come from? Which planet are you on? But if they look completely different, like the nose on the top of the head or feet out the ears or something, if they look different, then you could say, well, they're certainly not human. And the spirit himself is alive within it. Now you think of it as you collect some of the evidence as we go. Look here, page 202. In the meantime, this is in Eisenhower's day, a race of humanoid aliens landed at Homestead Air Force Base in Florida and successfully communicated with the U.S. government. The group warned us against the race orbiting the equator. So there were 2 alien races. Now, as far as I'm aware, and you probably, this is the only fallen world in the universe. So here now is one race warning us against another race. You see, there's an inconsistency here. And they offered to help us with our spiritual development. And later on you'll find out what that is. They demanded that we dismantle and destroy our nuclear weapons as the major condition. They refused to exchange technology, citing that we were spiritually unable to handle the technology we already possessed. And further down the page, President Eisenhower met with the aliens on February 20, 1954, and a formal treaty between the alien nation and the United States of America was signed. We then received our first alien ambassador from outer space. What's happening? It's like a miniature impersonation of Christ in a sense, isn't it? He was the hostage that had been left at the first landing in the desert. His name and title was, and listen, His Omnipotent Highness Krill. His Omnipotent Highness Krill, K-R-I-L-L. And this writer says of this report, he says, during my 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance and permission of the Etherians. Now, they captured, or they held one who was alive in the laboratory for some considerable time. And his name was Ebe, E-B-E. And apparently he didn't eat and digest the way we do. He had a photosynthetic system like plants. So his intake of food was very much like plants, and the excretion of waste was the same way as plants. So you see how the devil constructs these in his laboratory. Now, don't forget that the devil's had millions and millions and millions of years of experience. He's observed God at work. So you can imagine the sorts of things he can get up to. And his name, of course, is the Master Deceiver. Gerald Light called them Etherians. The alien emblem on their aircraft and uniforms and so on was known as the Trilateral Insignia. Today we have the Trilateral Commission. Now you've heard about the Trilateral Commission. It's like the CFR and the Club of Rome and so on. Very powerful group. Now, both of these landings and the second meeting were actually filmed, and these films exist today, this man said. The treaty stated that the aliens would not interfere in our affairs, and we would not interfere in theirs. We would keep their presence on Earth a secret. This is why Forrestal lost his life. They would furnish us with advanced technology and would help us in our technological development. Now, this is part of the treaty they made. They could abduct humans on a limited and periodic basis for the purpose of medical examination and monitoring of our development, with the stipulation that the humans would not be harmed and would be returned to the point of their abduction, and this is significant, and would have no memory of the event. Isn't that interesting? It was agreed that bases would be constructed on page 204, Doug, if you... It was agreed that bases would be constructed underground for the use of the alien nation, and that 2 bases would be constructed for the joint use of the alien nation and the United States government. Here they are working with demons, hand in hand. I'll go over to page 209. Now notice what happened. Yes. Yes, working together closely. Listen to this. By 1955, it became obvious that the aliens had deceived Eisenhower. Surprise? And had broken the treaty. Now listen. Mutilated humans were being found along with mutilated animals across the United States. It was suspected that the aliens were not submitting a complete list of human contacts and abductees to Majesty 12. Now, Majesty 12 is a human group that keeps all this under wraps. Notice the title they give themselves. They keep all this under wraps. It was suspected that not all abductees had been returned. The Soviet Union was accused of interacting with them, and this proved to be true. So they're also in it. And by the way, in the Cold War, both sides were using spirits to gain secret and confidential information from each other. Where you couldn't get a man into a secret vault that had a code system and was locked, you can't keep spirits out. So they were employing spirits. You've only got to check on Hoffman, who gives you some of these details. Now, I'm not altogether sure about Hoffman, but nonetheless, I haven't studied enough about him. I don't mean to discredit the man in any way. But he also brings us out in his documents, or his documentation on tape. Now, the aliens stated that they had been and were then manipulating masses of people through secret societies, witchcraft, magic, the occult, and religion. Familiar? No surprise to us. You must understand that this claim could also be a manipulation. After several Air Force combat engagements with alien craft, it also became apparent that our weapons were no match against them, or against theirs. Yes, against them. Now, all weapons are really inventions of the devil. And a man may be bright and intelligent, but although Satan can't read our thoughts, he can inject his thoughts into our brains. And a man can receive ideas, and he may be a good man to all other outward intents and purposes, but he can be given instructions, bit by bit, to develop a weapon that could be absolutely appalling. But the devil's knowledge of destruction and weapons of destruction far surpasses that of human beings. On to page 211. A major finding of the alien study, this was a complete study done on this, was that the public could not be told. That is the truth. It was believed that this would most certainly lead to economic collapse, collapse of the religious structure, and national panic, which could lead into anarchy. Secrecy thus continued. An offshoot of this finding was that if the public could not be told, Congress could not be told. So they were kept in the dark too. Now, next paragraph down says, another major finding was that the aliens were using humans and animals for a source of glandular secretions, enzymes, hormonal secretions, blood plasma, and possibly in genetic experiments. So what does that suggest to you? Who's medically minded here? What does that suggest to you? The construction of humanoid bodies. And don't forget that their knowledge of science far surpasses ours. And they deliberately would make a body which is different from the bodies on the earth to deceive. But look again. They wanted a source of glandular secretions. Well, what's the glands for? See, they control vital functions of the body. Some control growth. Some control sexual developments. Others control other things, you see. So they're vital to growth and maintenance of human bodies. Enzymes that speak about digestion and things like that. Food intakes. Hormonal secretions like hormones. Blood plasma. All vital, you see, for making human bodies, or humanoid bodies in this case. The aliens explained that these actions as necessary to their survival. Now that's a lot of hogwash, because they live as spirits anyway. And nothing is going to delay their destruction in the end. They stated that their genetic structure had deteriorated and that they were no longer able to reproduce. What a hoax. What a real hoax that is. 215. President Kennedy wanted to blow this wide open as well. His decision struck fear into the hearts of those in charge. His assassination was ordered by the Policy Committee, and the order was carried out by agents in Dallas. President John F. Kennedy was murdered by the Secret Service agent who drove his car in the motorcade, and the act is plainly visible in the Zapruder film. Watch the driver, not Kennedy, when you view this film. All of the witnesses who were close enough to the car to see William Greer, who was the driver, shoot Kennedy, were themselves all murdered within 2 years of the event. The driver and all those close to him. And they reckon if you watch this film, you can see the driver shooting over your shoulder. But everyone watches Kennedy and not the driver, you see. All right, I want to take you a little further. 225. And this cuts us close to Hobart here. And Port Arthur massacre. Now, those of us who know anything at all about the way the New World Order operates, and I think of that explosion in, where was it in America? Oklahoma, thank you. Many of us who thought about that knew, or we know, the way the governments often work. Winston Churchill once used this device in the First World War, and he arranged for a ship to be sunk with women and children on it. It's recorded in history now, in order to bring America into the war. Yep. So it's a politic action on the parts of governments. And very often you'll find that they will set up a straw man in order to achieve their goals. Now, Port Arthur may have been one of these, because listen to this. The secret governments, of course, use drugs, among other things. A great source of revenue for many a government, even in America, is drugs. They'll prosecute others for drugs. It's got to look good from a police point of view, but governments make millions out of drug running. And have you seen the film of Clinton when he was president, when he was governor of Arkansas? Some of you have seen that film? Pardon? The Clinton Chronicles. And they would have a big do, and drugs would be openly on the table for them all to partake of. But they would smuggle drugs and kill anyone who interfered with it. So if you see the videotape, the Clinton Chronicles, you'll find it on there. And you'll find some legal men dealing with it too. Now, the government encouraged, on page 225, the government encouraged the manufacture and importation of military firearms for the criminals to use. Now notice what they're doing. This is intended to foster a feeling of insecurity, which would lead the American people to voluntarily disarm themselves by passing laws against firearms. And notice how they do it. Using drugs and hypnosis on mental patients in a process called Orion, the CIA inculcated the desire in these people to open fire on schoolyards and thus inflame the anti-gun lobby. This plan is well underway and so far is working perfectly. The middle class is begging the government to do away with the Second Amendment, which is, of course, gives a man a right of self-defense. And here's a note by the author in here. Page 225. 225. The author makes this note. I found that these events have indeed happened all over the country. In every instance that I have investigated, the incident at the women's school in Canada, the shopping center incident in Canada, the Stockton, California massacre, and the murder of Rabbi Meir Kahane, the shooters were all ex-mental patients or were current mental patients who were all on the drug Prozac. This drug, when taken in certain doses, increases serotonin level in the patient, causing extreme violence. Couple that with a post-hypnotic suggestion or control through an electronic brain implant or microwave or ELF intrusion, and you get mass murder, ending in every case with the suicide of the perpetrator. Exhume the bodies of the murderers and check for a brain implant. I think you're going to be surprised. In every case, the name of the murderer's doctor or mental treatment facility has been withheld. I believe we will be able to establish intelligent connections and or connections to known CIA experimental mind control programs when we finally discover who these doctors of death really are. And what happened here? The Port Arthur massacres, the very next thing, disarm the country. I wonder why Brother Clinton is here. Yes. Yep.
To bring the death penalty in for crimes against the state, and one of the crimes would be Sabbath keeping. Satan is bringing this in to kill all Sabbath keeping.
Mrs. White says that God's people who stand true are going to be accused of the vilest of crimes. You and I are going to be accused of things like child interference. See? We're going to be accused of theft, murder, rape, the vilest of crimes, the things which they whip up the hysteria in people, say it's vicious. Boy, these pedophiliacs, hang them, kill them. So you'll be accused of pedophilia in order to get public opinion against you. Adventists, the name will stink.
They won't be going to court to protect them, will they?
Pardon?
They won't be going to court to protect the organisation.
No. There's being a justice of the peace, I get their magazine, Justice of the Peace. In here, the title, Playing Tag. For petty criminals in Britain, they tried this in Manchester and a couple of other cities in Britain. And if they don't want a person to go out, supposing a person goes out in the day and does shoplifting. So they tag him with an electronic tag. So he's got to be confined to his house by some kind of court ruling. You're confined to your house, say, for 6 weeks. You're not allowed to go out at all. So he says to himself, well, I'll go out down to the shops again, you see. The minute he steps outside his door, he's picked up by the electronic connection to the tag. And it doesn't take a minute to go and pick him up. They know exactly where he is. And they add another 2 weeks to his sentence. Now, people are doing this with their pet dogs in America. They have these tiny things, and by the way, some of these electronic devices can be injected with a hypodermic needle. They're so microcosmic, if you like. And here's a person who's lost a valuable dog, or any kind of a dog that's a real good pet, and or somebody may have taken it. And all they have to do is ring in the number, and they put it through the electronic devices, and they tell them exactly where that dog is. So we can be tagged, see? So just what method they're going to use, we don't know, but it's interesting that it should appear in the Justice of the Peace magazine, this electronic tagging. But there it is. So I thought you might be interested in that. Page 9, of course, is for your perusal only, Walt. However, you gain some idea now of what's going on behind the scenes. Now, I want to go over to page 173, back there, because there are very, very sinister things happening here. This matter of population explosion. Now, I have Paul Ehrlich's book on my shelf called The Population Explosion, or The Population Bomb, I think he calls it. And he argues and says that by such and such a time, and also a friend who goes in this bathysphere, this Frenchman, Jacques Cousteau. That's him, yes. Jacques Cousteau argues the same way. And he says that by a certain time this world will be overpopulated, we wouldn't have enough food supplies, or this or that or the other thing. And everyone ignores the books written by men who say that this world can go on for several hundred years still, with plenty of room. There's something sinister in this, you see. So we'll look at this under the section called The Anatomy of an Alliance. They're proposing population control programs. And I'll read from here. Many other population controls have been promulgated. The reduction of the world's population to workable levels has been virtually assured. Virtually assured. It is only a matter of time. Only a matter of time. The problem will be to curtail further human reproduction beyond appropriate approved levels. To handle that problem, the New World Order will adopt the communist Chinese model of population control. Now, for example, if a Chinese woman is on the streets and she's pregnant, she's taken off the streets immediately and compelled to have abortion, right away, before she ever gets home.
Did you see this week that China and India, the two most highly populated countries, Australia is now exporting to them an IVF program?
Well, that's not working. We're going to find out it's not working. All right. Now they say about this one, about the Chinese one, it's the only population control program that's ever worked. The old and the infirm have been periodically murdered, and couples are forbidden to have more than one child. So there are two ways of doing this, you see. Penalties are so severe in China that families with 2 children are extremely rare. Now, 3 children families are non-existent. Okay, now the next paragraph says, and don't forget we're dealing now with population control, not just with birth restriction. Tobacco fields in the United States have been fertilized with the radioactive tailings from uranium mines, resulting in a tremendous increase in the incidence of lip, mouth, throat and lung cancer. If you do not believe it, he says, just look at the incidence of lung cancer per capita before 1950 and compare it to the lung cancer per capita at the present time. That's page 173. Malathion. What's that? Yeah, we use it in agriculture a lot, don't we? That's right. It's a nerve gas too. So it goes on to say, malathion, a nerve gas developed by the Nazis during World War II to kill people, is being sprayed heavily on population centers in California. Population centers. The excuse used is that it will kill the Mediterranean fruit fly. It'll kill the Mediterranean fruit eater. The tip-off is that the orchards are not being sprayed, only people. The helicopters come from Evergreen in Arizona, a known government and a suspected CIA base. Turn the page. In the state of Colorado and elsewhere, dioxin is turning up in the drinking water in alarming levels. It should not be present in any amount. Where is it coming from? Dioxin is one of the deadliest poisons or chemicals known to man. Colorado citizens attempting to do battle against the dioxin contamination are met with closed doors, denial, and attacks upon their characters. So if you can't get the change, you get the man. He goes on the next paragraph to say, we have watched the news in horror as story after story unfolded, revealing that the Army and the CIA had released germs and viruses into the population to test their biological warfare capability. People are being used as guinea pigs without so much as asking their permission. According to Dr. Ava Sneed, the top of page 175, the San Francisco Bay Area has one of the highest cancer rates in the world. The San Francisco Bay Area has been revealed as one of the primary test locations of the CIA's biological and chemical programs. That's why. It is suspected that the San Francisco Bay Area was also subjected to large doses of radiation to test the effects upon a population over a prolonged period of time without telling them. What a high-handed way to deal with people. Why do they hate San Francisco? He says here the answer is that the largest homosexual population in America lives in San Francisco, and they have been targeted for extermination. Oh, by the way, back to 168. Since large populations were to be decimated, now, do you know what their target is? They tell you in this book. The target is to eliminate 2 billion people from this earth by the year 2000.
Doing a pretty good job in Rwanda, isn't it?
Yep, 2 billion people. Now, what's a billion? 1,000 million. So you've got 2,000 million people they killed off before the year 2000. Since large populations, you see, were to be decimated, the ruling elite decided to target the undesirable elements of society, and specifically targeted were the black, the Hispanic, and the homosexual populations. See? Well, the homosexuals were encouraged on the one hand. In fact, on page 166, 167, studies were done to determine a method to arrest a population explosion before the point of no return would be reached. It was determined that an immediate attack on the problem would involve 2 points of intervention. The first was to lower the birth rate, and the second was to increase the death rate. To lower the birth rate, several programs were put into motion. The first was the development of positive birth control methods using mechanical, gives them all here, chemical, medical, all these kinds of procedures. They were developed and implemented. The women's liberation movement was started with a demand for free abortions. Women didn't start this movement on their own. Somebody instigated it. And we have it in our own church. We have a women's movement in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. All right. Homosexuality was encouraged and gay liberation was born. You see, homosexuals do not have children. So that's why they were encouraged. And the whole homosexual business was fostered. Now, of course, because it failed, they say, well, who wants homosexuals anyway? So that's why San Francisco ends up as a target. Of course, other people go with it. The only alternative left to the world's ruling elite, here we're dealing with the CFR and the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome, the Bilderberger Group, all of these groups. This was a difficult thing to do, as no one wanted to pick people out of a crowd and line them up for execution. Neither did they relish the possible consequences of an enraged public upon discovering they were being systematically murdered. Of course, a very short but very deadly global war using nuclear weapons upon select population concentrations were contemplated, and to tell you the truth, was not ruled out. So they've kept that one as a reserve. What was needed was a bubonic plague or some other horrible but natural disease. The answer came from where? Came from Rome. What it says here. But also AIDS, you're quite right. Several top secret recommendations were made by Dr. Aurelio Pecci of the Club of Rome. He advocated that a plague be introduced that would have the same effect as a famous Black Death of history. If you've read about the Black Death, you know it was a horrible plague. The chief recommendation was to develop a microbe which would attack the autoimmune system and thus render the development of a vaccine impossible. By the way, they do have an answer to AIDS. And the reason why they're keeping it secret is because if any of the ruling elite and the wealthy get AIDS, they've got it for themselves. It's called a prophylactic, isn't it? Okay. 168. The African continent was infected with smallpox vaccine in 1977. The vaccine was administered by the World Health Organization. According to Dr. Robert Strecker, he quotes, "Without a cure, the entire black population of Africa will be dead within 15 years. Well, obviously, there are elements in here that are never taken into account because the 15 years is gone. And there are still millions of Africans. But of course, millions have died."
You say 77?
Yes.
15 years only just gone.
It's only just gone. Some countries are well beyond epidemic status. Well beyond it. The US population was infected in 1978 with a hepatitis B vaccine. And Dr. Wolf Sumes, the ex-roommate of Pope John Paul II, was the mastermind behind the November and October and March experimental hepatitis B vaccine trials conducted by the Centers for Disease Control in New York, San Francisco, and 4 other American cities. He loosed the plague of AIDS upon the American people. Here's your man. The gay population was infected. The ads for participants in this experiment asked for promiscuous homosexual male volunteers. Whatever causes AIDS was in the vaccine. The vaccine was manufactured and bottled in Phoenix, Arizona. I'd say Phoenix is a good place to keep away from. Now notice, who gave the order? The order was given by the policy committee of the Bilderberger Group, based in Switzerland. The one you will be able to check the easiest is the Haig Kissinger. Now, you know Haig was a foreign secretary, so was Kissinger. So the one you will be able to check the easiest is the Haig Kissinger depopulation policy, which is administered by the State Department. This policy dictates that third world nations take positive and effective steps to decrease their populations and hold them in check, or they get no aid from the United States. If the third world nations refuse, civil war usually breaks out, and the rebels are usually found to be trained, armed, and financed by the CIA. That's what's happening in South America, Guatemala, and places like that. Yeah. The Haig-Kissinger depopulation policy has taken over various levels of government, as in fact determining U.S. foreign policy. And you know, when you think of it, Revelation says, "And as many would not accept should be killed."
Isn't Kissinger a left over from the Nazi era?
I don't know if Kissinger is.
He had a German accent.
We know Kurt Waldheim was. But I don't know about Kissinger. He's Jewish, but the Jews are heavily involved in this, but only certain Jews. But we can't blame the Jews. It's a whole new world order policy. Mark you, in this book is a complete document of the protocols of the wise men of Zion. Now, if you haven't read those, it's certainly interesting to read, because every aspect of their attack upon society, they came out blatantly with it. They tell you what they're going to do, how they're doing it, and everything else, and nobody seems to be able to do anything about it. Powerless. And everything that they've said, and the protocols of the wise men of Zion have been known since 1700. And everything you see in there written is coming to pass. It's astonishing, to say the least. The planning organization operates outside the White House and directs its entire efforts to reduce the world's population by 2 billion people through war, famine, disease, and any other means necessary.
Just the things that Jesus outlined in Matthew 24.
Yes, exactly.
Wars, rivers, wars, pestilences.
Yes. Thomas Ferguson, the Latin American case officer for the State Department's Office of Population Affairs, made a following statement. There is a single theme behind all our work, this work of killing. We must reduce population levels. Either they do it our way, through nice, clean methods, oh, like that, or they will get the kind of mess that we have in El Salvador, or in Iran, or in Beirut. Population is a political problem. They make great assumptions here. Then he goes on to say down here, the government of El Salvador failed to use our programs to lower their population. Now they get a civil war because of it. What a statement. There will be dislocation and food shortages. They still have too many people there. Civil wars are somewhat drawn out ways to reduce population. The quickest way to reduce population is through famine, like in Africa, or through disease, like the Black Death, all of which might occur in El Salvador. And his budget every year has been increased. 1990, it was 190 million. In 81, it was 220 million. And the Global 2000 report, which is the date at which they're aiming for, calls for doubling that figure. Ferguson said, we'll go into a country with a high population, you see. We will go into a country and say, here is your so-and-so development program. Throw it out the window. Start looking at the size of your population and figure out what must be done to reduce it. If you don't like that, if you don't want to choose to do it through planning, then you'll have an El Salvador or an Iran, or worse, a Cambodia. That's what they tell them. It's brutal. These men are entirely without conscience. But the trouble is, you and I are helpless in the face of their power, except for the Lord Jesus Christ. We're up against something huge here. Dealing with El Salvador, he said something had to be done. The birth rate is 3.3%, one of the highest in the world. Its population, he complained, will double in 21 years. The civil war can help things, but it would have to be greatly expanded. They just deal with it so callously. To reduce population quickly, said Ferguson, you have to pull all the males into the fighting and kill significant numbers of fertile, childbearing age females. He criticized the current civil war in El Salvador. You are killing a small number of males and not enough fertile females to do the job on the population. If the war went on to 30 or 40 years like this, then you might accomplish something. Unfortunately, we don't have too many instances like that to study. It's an appalling situation, isn't it? But how many of us, we've had inklings, little ideas of what's going on here or there, but here it is in the open blatantly. Now, If you put all these elements down, you begin to see a picture of demons collaborating very closely with human beings. And they're becoming so accustomed to working with these things they call aliens that it's going to be a very simple step for them to accept Satan as Jesus Christ. It isn't going to take long. Page 177, according to plans, many people are going to die between now and the year 2000. Just a complete, bold, clear statement. Well, I've given you a thumbnail sketch of that, and I don't want to go on ad nauseum.
The main reason is that Satan hates God, and we are in the image of God. That's in a nutshell.
Yes, Satan knows what his end is going to be. And there's no point in him saying, well, I'll get the whole world in rebellion and say, well, there you are, I'm master of this world, you've got to leave me alone. He knows his days are numbered. So he wants to see as many of us destroyed as he's going to be destroyed, as he can have destroyed.
It's the only way you can hurt Jesus now.
Yes, that's the only way he can really hurt him. That's a good point, Walt.
That's been showed that we did these parts, the human parts and things like that, that Satan isn't able to produce God.
No, he can't produce. That's why he's got to get human parts. And obviously, there's some. Look, I've tried to think this through, and I've only got a broad idea as to what kind of policies they're following. I can't pin down the detail. It's hard to see the detail in this great big morass of things, but Satan knows what he's doing, and the whole thing may be confused to our looking in a way, although the dreadful threat remains and becomes larger with the looking and the reading. But Satan is working to a plan, but thank God that our Savior is as well. And we who trust him, and I tell you this, we're going to need faith. We're going to need faith. And the more we bend our energies to getting that faith, the better off we're going to be. So he's going to cause all, Revelation 13 verse 16, cause all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, so none of us are going to be left out. Rich and poor, free and bond. So it's not really, as I said this morning, Marcusson had a very apt expression, because the papacy is depicted by this woman in scarlet, the woman of sin with a cup of abominations in her hand. So he referred to them as the devil and his girlfriend, which is the papacy, which is a very apt description when you think of it. But these are they. Even the woman, or the papacy, still takes its orders from Satan. So whether the rich or poor, or no matter what, Satan is presenting a world in total rebellion if he can, but you and I are getting in his way, and this is going to be the problem. So you and I actually become the targets. And I did remark this morning, when you get a calendar nowadays, the day starts on Monday, first day of the week instead of Sunday. Therefore the seventh day becomes Sunday. And it's referred to as a Sabbath. It's referred to as the seventh day of the week. All Adventist terms, or Bible terms, for the true Sabbath. So you're going to have to call yourselves, if you set up a church and you can't use the name, because you know how the division is nowadays, is attacking people who use the name Seventh-day Adventist. And you are better Seventh-day Adventists than they would be. So what are you going to call yourselves? See, you can call yourselves the remnant people, but if you still want to keep the idea of the Sabbath, you're going to have to call yourself the Church of Sabbath, or the Sabbath keeping, or put in brackets after Sabbath, Saturday keeping Church of Adventists.
Yes, because they call Sunday the Sabbath now.
Yes, that's right. So you've got to make a distinction if you're going to use the term Sabbath. Pardon?
I'm just rejuvenating the sign at the front of our church, and it used to say Sabbath services in brackets Saturday, and I put in red seventh day, and in blue Sabbaths. services, so everyone will know that the seventh day Sabbath is not the first day of the week, but it is the seventh.
Well, if you call it a 7-day Sabbath, it's going to be Sunday according to the new calendar.
Yes.
Just on the air yesterday, it hit me. They were talking about some sports function that was coming up on Sunday, and they said, so you're going to have a Sabbath on the golf course or something like that. They used Sabbath in reference to Sunday just yesterday. I first saw it in a calendar in 1953. That's when I first noticed it.
Yes, yeah. It goes back a way, actually. Now, we get them from Britain now. We get these nice old English homes, and people from Britain send us calendars Monday, first day of the week. So it's going, you see, the devil is trying to get at us. This is what the whole business is. They're making seeds today that won't reproduce. Pardon? Oh, yeah, sure. Actually, we're the ointment. He's the fly.
It's going to create terrible confusion. They're not going to get away with it.
No, of course not. No.
German Mittwoch is Wednesday.
Yes,
If they're going to change that, well, it's not Wednesday. It's not the middle of the week.
they'll ignore that one anyway. They'll just use it as a day, just a name.
In French, I tell you, Sabbath is actually
Yeah.
Saturday.
Mm. Have you tried to get seeds from your plants? Do you know they're making seeds today that will not reproduce? You've got to go and buy a new packet of seeds again. What's the reason for it? So you can't reproduce your food. Yes, that's in the protocols.
Places you can get over
You can still get some, but the day's coming when you won't be able to. And even herbs are going to be placed under doctors now. You have to get a prescription to get herbs, vitamins, minerals, everything else. That's right. And that's a point, Leo, that we ought to stress, you see. God may use the manna system again. But the point is, if there's no hope, go ahead in faith. That's what you've got to learn to do. Look, he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. Now, I've just explained that we can do this with electronic tagging of human beings, of dogs. It's going to be no problem to them. But they have to do it, they can only do it with your consent in any case. You still can rebel. Even if they inject you with their devices, you can still hold to your principles. It doesn't change your mind. And that no man might buy or sell, therefore you can't reproduce seeds. I tried to grow some garlic, and I got some garlic you'd normally get for your table, it wouldn't grow. I had to get some garlic from a person who was actually growing it. That grows. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to save all that garlic root. All right. Then you get the name of the beast, the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast. It is the number of a man, and the number is 666. Is it any wonder that we started then with Revelation chapter 6 and verse 8? And when you think of it now, and I looked and behold a pale horse. Now you see why it's called the pale horse. It's not pale in a sense. It's pale, but it's like a bruise. You know what color is a bruise? It's sort of yellow dark, isn't it? Greenish yellow dark color. And it's a fit symbol of something that's dead, isn't it? Well, it's a mottled, yeah, but it's a sickly looking color. Behold the pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And you can see that coming to pass in what this man has written. And he doesn't profess to be a Christian, but there's something interesting I want to read here just in closing. It's remarkable, and I want you to think about this. It's page 90. The Pope has challenged world leaders. See? The Pope has challenged world leaders by claiming that the people of the world already recognize the absolute authority of Rome because they observe the Sunday Sabbath that was ordered by the Pope in the Council of Laodicea, AD 364. He's already done this. The original 10 Commandments given by God ordered that we should, and he quotes the proper one. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that's within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth and the sea and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. He quotes that in full. He knows. The seventh day, he says, the Sabbath was handed to Moses by God is Saturday. The celebration of Sunday as a Sabbath is verification that the people recognize the Pope as superior to God. The only whole people who have not recognized the authority of the Pope are the Jewish people. That's a laugh. They don't. Only people are Seventh-day Adventists, true Seventh-day Adventists. I was in America in October last year, as some of you probably know, doing a preaching tour. And the Pope, I was coming down from Ohio, Zanesville in Ohio. And I flew down, I was to change planes at a place called Newark, Newark. And because the Pope was actually in Newark taking off, no plane was allowed to land or take off. And we circled around there for the best part of an hour. They treat him like God. The only consolation I had was I was closer to heaven than he was. He was still on the ground. But I got to Heartland the same night. I caught another flight down to Washington. And it was on television. And there was a choir singing to him in some cathedral or church. And you know what they were singing? He is as great as God. That's what they were singing.
They obviously don't think he's everlasting. They wouldn't be protecting him like that.
They wouldn't know. So I hope this enlightens you a little bit as to what is coming on the earth in one form, shape, or another. Disaster is staring the human race in the face. And total slavery by a handful of men who are the very rich or the elite because they can't do without the super thinkers. See? The rest of us will be like worker ants in a colony. You'll own nothing. You won't be able to own a house or a car. Nothing will be your own. And you will be told whether you can have children or not. And you'll be told how many children you may have, if you may have them. And all these wilderness areas that are listed under the World Heritage Organization will be taken over by the very rich and the elite. That they will be their dwelling places. That's what they're all after. That's what it's all about. Under fine, highfalutin names. World slavery. Thank you.
I was thinking, Tom, Mrs. White.